Okay, my artists, let's get started again. You can see, even though my painting fell off the board last week, it's still just fine. I'm not worried about it. And before we continue with the actual painting of the flowers today, I wanted to address just a little bit the background. You can see already in my painting that almost everything that was underneath has disappeared. My color wheel that I was experimenting with has almost completely disappeared. And down here I feel really good about the way it's looking. This is annoying me a little bit, so I'm going to do something about that right now. But first I want to talk to you about the ways that we can give feeling to our painting. Now, one of the things that you need to know is the difference between using complementary colors and analogous colors. When you're using complementary colors, you are using opposite colors. Now, you can see that our flowers are going to be yellow, kind of a mahogany. We're going to have some greens. If you wanted to make your picture exciting, you would use the complement of one of those colors, the complement, say, of yellow. That's the opposite color that you're looking for. And in that case, you're going to be going for a violet or a purple. And then when you're finished, your piece is going to be exciting to look at. Or you can do the other thing. You can use the analogous colors. Right now I've got it set up that way. The analogous colors to the yellows and the greens would be the yellow, the green, the blue. Those are colors that live next to each other on the color wheel. And so you've got your yellow as a primary, you've got your blue as a primary, you've got your green as a secondary in between those two colors. So I think I'm going to continue to go with that since I started. And what I just want to do is soften down this green in the background a little bit. Now my palette is still looking pretty good. See that palette? My paint's still looking pretty good. So, but I'm going to start blending a little color here. So here I'm going to take this little bit of green, stick it in here, but I want to tone that down. I don't want it to be as strong as, say, my leaves are going to be. So I think I'm going to take some yellow and add some yellow to that. Rather than adding the white, although, you know, we can try adding a little white too, just to see. And you notice I'm just foofing that color around. I'm not worried about making that color perfect, and I'm not worried about going right up to the edges and covering everything. I'm just wanting to create an illusion. So now I'm grabbing a little bit of the white, and I'm going to add a little bit of that white in there too, and see what that does to my color in this area. Come back in here a little bit around, very, very loosely. When you're painting, the idea is not to get it perfect in there. Now remember, I'm going to have a situation here. I've got the color, the greens here, as opposed to the greens there. And I'm going to have to decide how I am going to add this green in without having it interfere with this green. I want this to fade back. So I'm going to take it, I'm going to add a little more white to this green in here and see if I can't get that green to fade back a little bit. Yeah, see, now that's starting to happen. So that my greens in that flower base start coming forward. Again, notice that I'm just very loosely painting in the background. We don't want people spending too much time looking at our backgrounds. We want them looking at our flowers. So that's what we're working for. Now I'm going to come back in here, and I notice that this is lighter. I'm still going to be having some issues in here, perhaps, with what is light and what is darker. And then I've got my darker green coming around in here, but I want it even darker than that. So remember, we added blue to it last time, and I'm just picking up my color at the edge of my paint pile. Do you see that? You can see where the green is at the edge of my paint pile. I'm trying really hard not to get that mixed in. Remember, we are working from the back of our painting to the front of our painting. So right now we're still dealing with the back edge. I'm working on this part of the base of my flower. And again, I'm not trying to make it perfect. I'm just trying to get an impression. An impression. It's kind of like impressionist painting here that I'm demonstrating with this composition. Okay, notice I'm getting in over some of my whites. I'm not really worried about that because I'm going to be painting forward later. If I really, really, really want to get this green dark, I'm going to need to add some red into it, all right? So that I'm going for the violet. Ooh, I got a little too much red in there. A little too much red. So I'm going to come back with some of my green. Maybe some blue first. Get that violet color in there. We want that red to show through. You don't want to eliminate It's hard for me to talk and paint at the same time. Have you noticed that? I can't do two things at once. All right. So we're going to bring back some more of that greenness, get rid of that redness and go back to that greenness a little bit. There we go. So there's the base of my flower, and that's pretty much all I want to say about the base of my flower right now. In the other flowers, you don't really see that. Let's talk about the leaves. Now I started working with leaves in here. Notice how I just continue on with the color I've got in my paintbrush. I don't need to get any new color. I can just use up what's in my paintbrush. See how that works across my picture plane, and just put in excuse me, a little more of that leaf color down in here. And again, I'm just suggesting leaves. I don't need to make leaves. I'm just suggesting that those are leaves in there. I might want to get a little more light. You can see there's a light edge here on this leaf down here. Now, class, this may be hard for you to be following along with me because I'm working from a photograph that's right in front of me and I can see it easily. You may not be able to see it as well. If that is the case, feel free to go get your own sunflowers. You can get them in the store. You might be lucky enough to be able to pull them out of your garden. And get those sunflowers, bring them into the house, put them in a vase, and look at them directly. See if you can see what I'm looking at when I'm looking at my sunflowers. Just get a little more color here along, lighten up this edge of this leaf down here a little bit. Maybe lighten up the edge of that leaf over there a little bit. Just want to imply that there are leaves down here. I don't need to spend a lot of time talking about them, just implying the leaf. All right, there. I think that's pretty good. Picking up a little more color. Wanted to get a cleaner line right in here to make more of a shape, just because. All right, I feel okay with that. Next job, let's go back to our browns here. We have two brown centers in our leaves, and we want that, the edge especially. This edge out here is really dark. So I want to darken up this brown that I was creating, in which case I'm going to wipe off my brush first because I was putting some whites into my brush. I want to get those out of there. And I'm going to go back and I'm going to start with some blue. So I'm picking some blue at the edge of the paint pile. Always remember to go to the edge. And I'm going to put some blue around the outside edge of my the center of my flower. Then I'm going to come back and pick up some red. Notice I'm not washing my brush in between. That's okay. Get some red in here, because the idea is that I want to build up at the edge. I want to build up this real dark. We're going to need a little bit of green in here, because what we've got now is we've got too much red, and we want to see a little bit more green, because green is the opposite of red, and opposites make brown. See, it's starting to turn brown. And notice I just use teeny tiny bits and build. Build. Okay, I'm going to soften that down towards the middle. I don't want to cover up everything I did last week, but I want to get more darkness at the edge. And it's really blatant here on this big mahogany flower. So I'm going to come back here and get some blue. Now notice there's color in my brush because I haven't washed my brush. So do you see how it's starting to look like dark brown right away? I don't even have to hardly blend, because I've already got those colors mixed in my brush, and my brush is holding that color. Okay. Now, in my painting, photograph, I can see that there are these wonderful little yellow seeds in here. And I'm going to be looking for a smaller brush. See if I can find a smaller brush in here. Here we go. Because I want to get some of these yellow dabbies in there. So I've gotten a smaller brush out of my brush pile, and I'm going to just dip in the yellow and just kind of look at that nice contrast. It softens up the edge that I had created between the darks and the lights. And now you have a more gentle transition between the two colors. So now I've got my little bits of pollen in there. Even though I really can't see it on the other one, I'm going to add just a little bit to the other one. This is artist's privilege. You know, you get to, this is your painting. You get to do it whatever way you want to. All right. Now, that says pretty much what I want to say in my background. If you decided that you were going to redo all of the color in your background, if you wanted to work with those complements to make your picture exciting, go ahead and play with it. Remember, the wonderful thing about working in acrylic is that if you hate it, you can just paint over it. It's never really done, and it's never really destroyed. So here we go. I am going to go back here to this yellow flower. Now I want to start with a little bit of a larger brush. If you get too small to begin with your brushes, little brushes are for details. If you use brushes for the large part, what's going to happen is your work is going to be too fussy. And we don't want our paintings to be too fussy. We want them to look as if we just created them, okay? So here we go. I'm going back to my yellow. Now we underpainted with the white so that we can get this yellow to appear to be a beautiful, clear color. Now I'm going back to my yellow sunflower at the top of my painting, and I'm going to start by just painting all my white petals with the yellow. Careful, because your mahogany one is overlapping here, so we don't want to get into the mahogany. Not that that's going to be a problem. We can always cover that up later. But I want to get, and notice that I'm going right over. I was very careful where I was leaving edges in here, but now I'm painting right over those edges. And notice it softens those edges so that those edges almost become these edges that are here between the flowers. Going ahead and painting over all the white. trying to make a clean edge at the edge of my flowers. I want these flowers to have a clean edge on them. My brush is old and it's a little foofy. You can see how it's foofy. See that foofiness? Time to get a new brush, but I haven't got one right now, so I'll just use this. Be very careful. Going right over that green that I had in there. And you can see that our flower already has some dimension in it because of the fact that we went over the green that was in there. So we've already created some dimension in that flower. Isn't that wonderful? Now I'm checking on my shape to make sure I like the shape that's starting to show here. I want them all coming out from the center, so I want to straighten this one out a little bit. Now I'm getting a little more exacting about my flower shape. Okay, all right. Now, notice we have some goldens in this flower. It's not just the yellows, it's golden. I see that there's a petal back here and I want to kind of get that petal in behind into my mahogany sunflower. All right. So now I'm going to come back and I'm going to add just the teeny tiniest amount of red into my yellows in order to get a bit of a golden. Just a teeny tiny. Be very careful because you'll be amazed at how quickly this color becomes orange. Oh yeah. And I'm going to take this orangey color and I'm going to move this around. It doesn't have to be exactly what you see in your picture, but what you do want to do is get that depth of color going in your flowers. So you're going to be, and I'm mixing right at the edge of my paint pile. Can you see that? Oh geez, and I'm pouring it all over me and the floor. I have water in my palette because of the spray that I did. Remember when you're painting, and this is something I never do, and I always regret it. My husband always reminds me that I should change my clothes before I start painting. Wear old clothes or wear a smock over your clothes. I used to have a smock. I don't know what happened to it. But that way you protect your clothes. Acrylic paint, oil paint, these things are permanent, and they do not come out of your clothes. So you want to take care of your clothes. Oh, I hit the, see what happened? I hit the green. Oh dear. Didn't want that green in there. But is it okay if I have a little green in my flower? Absolutely, because if I look here carefully, I sense a little bit of green. So I washed off my brush and I'm just going to push that green through. Art does not have to be perfect, and it's okay if my colors get a little mixed up. All right, rinse that brush again to get that green out, and I'm going to go back and try and pick up some more oranges. Mixing a little bit in my palette right at the edge of the color so that I do not mix my whole pile of paint. I don't want to lose my clear colors because I don't want to have to start out or have to go back and redo my entire palette. All right, there we go. So I feel like that's got enough of that orange in there. But then I want you to observe that there's a little bit of this golden color. Now, I'm going to make that golden color. I'm going to get, it's kind of a flat greeny browny color in here. So I'm going to start by taking a little bit of my green over here. I'm going to add a little bit of my red. Then I want to get a little yellow in it to lighten it up a little bit. Oh, maybe add a little more red back. And remember, this is an experiment. I don't know if this color is going to be right or not. Maybe a little more green. But I'm going to experiment with it into my flower. I'm going to try putting a little bit of it. Oh yeah, not bad. Not bad. And I see it more at the base. And it keeps showing up. Sometimes going out and behind. And what you're doing is you're adding depth of color to your flowers. And that's what we want to do. We want to give that sense of depth of color. We want to know that these flowers are made up actually of lots of different color, not just a little. Okay, all right. Now, I'm noticing that I'm losing a little bit of the roundness of my center there, and I liked that roundness, so I'm going to come back and here and get that roundness back in. It's not as dark. I don't want to lose the roundness of my flower. And then I'm going to pull some of that dark right in a couple of places. So you see how I'm just adding little bits of color, adding color as I go. Let's see what that does back there. Because we're not looking at individual flowers. We're going to be looking at the whole painting as an overall complete whole. All right, now I'm feeling like I want a little bit more orange in my flower, just at the base. So I'm going to come back here, pick up a little red, pick up a little yellow again, blend that in, and come back here and get just a little more orange in the base. Pull it up through. And you just play with this. If you feel like you've gone too far, then you go back in the other direction. It's really very fun. To paint a picture is actually a lot of fun if you're not worried about making mistakes. And I'll be honest with you, when I first started out as an artist, I worried a lot. I worried about making a mistake. And you've heard me talk about happy accidents. And what I found is by making those mistakes, just as in all of life, you learn things. And sometimes what you learn is that that mistake was the best thing you ever did in your painting. So don't be afraid to go too far, because you can always go back. Now I want to bring in a light yellow. A light yellow. So I'm taking my white, I'm adding a little tiny bit of yellow to it. And you see how I'm blending off to the side, and then I'm going to come back here and I'm going to bring in that light yellow. Give the flower a sense of transparency. These petals are so light and airy, and the thing that's so wonderful about this photograph is, and of course when I was taking the photograph I wasn't thinking about that, but the light's behind the flower, and so you get kind of a luminosity through the flower, and you get this paper thin, like tissue paper thin quality to the flower. Okay, I'm done with that one. Now we're going to approach this one, but before we do, I have to move my tape. Didn't want it to fall off like it did last week. So here we go. Now I'm going to come over here and I'm going to do the same thing with this painting, with this flower over here. I'm checking my time. My time is up at the top of my screen. So I am going to go ahead and come back with my yellow, just like I did with the last one. And I'm going to fill in my flower with the yellow. And I'm not going to worry about going over the green, because look at, when I go over that green, I right away create a depth of color in the yellow. It's kind of fun to watch it transform, isn't it? Aren't you kind of impressed with what you're doing? It's not that hard. It's just you have to remember you're going step by step. And don't be afraid to take your time. And don't be afraid to change your mind. Okay, now this is behind the leaf, so that's kind of a squared off edge right there because there's a leaf edge right there. So I'm going to leave that all squared off. Okay, and there's one little bit of yellow that I can see back in here behind that flower. And the rest of it, I feel like I want this to come this way a little bit more so that it looks like it's falling this way. I want it to fall this way. So I've added a little bit of white to get that to fall. Before it was swooping back, but I want it to fall. So I'm going to add a little bit of white to my yellow so that I make my yellow more opaque. And I'm going to push it into this area to cover up that green so that I get that sense that these petals are falling forward, because that's way leaning too back for what I want to do now. Changing my flower shape a little bit. And now I'm going to come back and do exactly the same thing. I'm going to start pulling in these oranges. That's the first place I'm going to go. So I'm going to pick up a little yellow, go back to where I was blending oranges, and I'm going to pick up a little orange, and I'm going to start coming back in here with a little bit of orange. Now, this is great. I want to show you something I just did. I didn't wash my brush off before I started mixing my red and my yellow together. But in my brush, there was white. And I want you to see, I don't know if you can see it or not, this orange that I made does not have the intensity of that orange. It's way softer. I don't like that. I want to start really strong. I can always tone down later. Remember, if you put white in your brush, you have created a tint. And that tint is going to affect anything you add to it. So you want to be sure that you get that tint out of your brush when you're mixing your colors. All right, now I'm going to for my strong yellow. There we go. Strong yellow. Or excuse me, strong orange. I'm making an orange, a little bit of yellow, especially down in here. Remember, I can always tone it down later if I feel like it's gotten too bright, but really class, you know, that little bit of brightness makes pops in your picture. We want our picture to pop, so it doesn't matter if you get it a little too bright in places. Okay, now I'm going to go back for that greenish yellow. Do you see here that in a lot of places I have this shadow yellow, and because this is so green right here, that shadow is going to pick up the green and yellow. So I'm going to pick up my green, pick up my yellow, pick up a little bit of my green, and I'm going to push that into my flower. It's really shadowed here underneath. A little more yellow, teeny tiny bit more green, and this part under here is really in a lot more shadow. See, now I'm already starting to tone down my oranges just by doing this. Then I'm going to add back a little bit of that brown. Now, if you are paying attention to your palette, you may be able to find where you were mixing that brownish color before. This is all dried. That's not part of my palette. But I had a little bit of that brown mixed in here. So now I'm coming back and I'm going to use that because I want this color down here to be more subdued. There's not as much light here. And then there's one part here where there's not as much light. Okay. Now that I've done that, cleaned my brush, I was getting darker, darker, darker. Now I want to get lighter, 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 because I want this to show lots of light up here. There's lots of light right in here, and then there's an edge, and then a little teeny tiny bit of light there. So now I'm going to take my yellow. Whoa, that brush was not clean. Take my yellow, add some white to it. I am going to make a tint. And I'm going to come back here, and I am going to tint up my flower petals here. There's a little bit of light right in there, so I'm going to just glump on some light there, and then I'm going to come down here. I can see that there's some light that's coming through right here, and then a little bit of a light edge here. One of the things I really like here, there's a hole in this flower. Now that hole appears white in the photograph, but in my picture, what is behind is a green. So I'm going to come back, get some green. I'm going to add a little bit of white to it because I want to make it opaque. And I'm going to come back and put a hole in my flower right there. Just there. So it's going to read kind of like a hole. Okay. Get some more green here. Okay. We'll see if I want to add more color to that later. Right now, I think I've gone as far as I want to for today. And I want you to experiment with your yellow flowers. I want you to continue to paint them. Then next week, we will finish our painting by concentrating on the focal point. And I hope you all realize by now that our focal point is really this mahogany flower. All right, very nice job so far. We can make adjustments at the end if we want to put in any details. Excellent work. Ooh, and if I don't forget, maybe I should write this down somewhere, bugs. There was a very famous American artist who did flowers, and he liked to put bugs in his paintings. And really, it got to the point where his paintings were priced by how many bugs he had hiding in the flowers. Now that would really up our game, don't you think? So we might end up putting a bug in our flower. Look for pictures of bees. Look for pictures of bees and ladybugs, beetles. I would not go with a butterfly, because if we were to put a butterfly in there, there would be competition about what should I look at. Should I look at the butterfly? Should I look at the flowers? But if we put a bug or two in the background, it's going to be a surprise. People are going to, oh my gosh, look at, there's a bug in this picture. And I have to remember his name. It was a very long French name. And we'll see if I can't look that up before the next visit. All right? Good job today. See you soon. Bye.